Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to another Ummatics Colloquium. This week's session is somewhat unusual. We are engaging in a follow-up session with Dr. Jamel Akbar, who very kindly contributed a session with us last month. So Dr. Jamel Akbar is an architect, educator, and theorist. His theoretical contributions center around the built environment, where he measures quality through concepts like responsibility, control, ownership, and interventions. He studied architecture at King Saud University and earned both a master's in architecture and a Ph.D. from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. His magnum opus is entitled Qas Al-Haq, and he will be talking about this over the course of today. The full understanding of his project, or a fuller understanding of his project, which is written over a very large body of work, is better grasped through listening to the first part of this session. So we're actually going to get a bit of a recap of this with Dr. Jamel momentarily, but just important to highlight that this is something which is best understood in the context of the larger body of work, and in particular by listening to the last session in which he shared extensive slides. In addition to that, I would like to encourage all of the audience members to write in questions in the chat, and these will be addressed by Dr. Jamel over the course of the Q&A. But for now, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Jamel Akbar. فليتفضل مشكورا إن شاء الله.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you for this second opportunity to share with you some ideas of Qas Al-Haq. First, a few reminders from the last meeting. If you remember that I was saying that the purpose of this presentation is to bring your attention to the following. Creating the Ummah can only be achieved through hukuk. Why? Our Ummah is dead because its members are dead. They are dead because they do not know their rights of Sharia. If it is known to them, it is more likely that they will act and become alive, and then the Ummah becomes alive. The second reminder is that the issues in Qas Al-Haq, it's not about empowerment or enablement or grassroots movements. Those movements were established in the West because there is central authority that holds power, and give away those powers depending on the struggle in the society between the different classes. And that creates some unrest in the society. So the society is always in a clash between different interest groups and so on. However, with Islam, it is hukuk. It's very clear. The boundaries are well known. This is my right. That's your right. That is their right. That is our right. So because it is very well known, it will continue over centuries, and that makes the society very well stable in its progress. So there is major difference between hukuk in Islam and those movements. Many people referring to Qas Al-Haq, they say, it resembles grassroots movements and so on. Another issue or third reminder that many researchers commented that Qas Al-Haq resembles the movements of Hayek, Milton Friedman, neoliberalism. The answer is that those movements that liberate people in economy, they concentrate on economy. And then a question arises, what is the role of the government? So there is a vacuum. Now that vacuum is filled by hukuk in Sharia. For example, how does rights of hospitality and rights of Ibn Sabil interact with zakah and revivification principles? I will explain this relationship in this session, inshallah. Now, if you remember, last time I tried to pose some argument. The first one is that regardless of people, culture, or religion, we might save human civilizations from pollution and climate change by learning from hukuk, thus reducing monopoly, stratification, unemployment, and extravagant production. Current economic and political structure will never lead us to sustainable environment. That is a major argument I'm holding. The second argument is that Western modes of thinking usually leads to rules, regulations, and then bureaucracy, and then, for sure, intervention, which leads to monopoly stratification. Sharia does the opposite through rights, through hukuk. The third argument is that if one think of the number of titles of projects or research or centers that deals with sustainability, he will be amused how much they are. They are so huge in number. Yet they don't relate that to hukuk rarely, which means that we are not short of social, economic, and technical paradigms or ideas to reduce miseries such as pollution. With all these centers, with all this research, still pollution is getting worse. I.e., we are short of understanding the relationship between societies and rights or hukuk. The fourth argument is about Malthusian theory of population. My argument is that if we follow the Malthusian argument, we are contributing to pollution and climate change. Why? Because their argument about the scarcity of resources, and it's inevitable, that will lead to the control of those resources. Controlling resources will lead to rules and regulations that, when implemented, create stratification, and then unemployment, and then the same story that I told you last session about flagging people to work harder and so on. The fifth argument is that either we have, as they claim, organized societies such as democratic ones, or it is anarchy. The argument I explained last time is that no, Islam will fill the vacuum that might be created if the roles of the state is diminished, because that vacuum or emptiness is filled by hukuk. And if you remember last time, we said that we cannot understand Sharia, how it works for these days. That's why we went to all kinds of ijtihad. And that there is another approach. If we connected those rights, those hukuk together, we can see how they work. And there we talked about the metaphor of the jacket, of the dress, and we explained يقص الحق وهو خير الفاصلين. Now let me explain it today differently. And I was explaining this to Mr. Abdurrahman, and he said, why don't you put it? It's a nice idea. If one look at the river is a product of rain. Each drop of rain combines with others, and gradually a river is created. So if we think with this metaphor that each drop is haqq, right of irrigation is haqq, right of servitude is haqq, right of collecting rainwater is haqq, right of istitrak is haqq, right of possessing minerals and owning them is haqq. If one bring those hukuk together, each two haqq makes a bigger drop of water. Each drop of water creates a bigger drop of water. And those two can only reveal their potentiality when we put them together. And these two, when they put together, with the other two put together, reveals further potentiality. And so until we create a river that I called مقصوصة الحقوق, which is the rights that's already given to us by God. Now, to prove that, I'll show you now one more example. I think it's important example to criticize the economy these days that they call Islamic finance, Islamic economy. Now let's take connecting 8 hadith with some verse of Quran, and I'll speak about each one, then we'll leave it aside. If you remember last time, we talked about 4 hadith, من معناه ما سبق, and we said that those 4 hadith or 3 hadith, because the first two is the same, من سبق إلى ما لم يسبق إليه مسلم فهو له. Those 4, as the ulama said, will give the people the right to possess minerals, and then they own it and they just have to pay zakah. So it is theirs, it is not to the state. Now let's leave this aside. We'll connect that with the right of revivification. What happens if somebody uh, owns a land and he found in that land minerals? Does he take it or no? I will not explain that. I have few texts here. You can go and see it later. You can read it later. It's about the fifth hadith, which is, or the fifth hadith about land revivification. Okay, so we can go through that later. For those who are interested in Arabic, they can go through it. These are clips from the book of Qas Al-Haq. Now, let's leave that aside. The sixth hadith is about zakah and how it should be object. And this is a hadith in the screen from Sahih al-Bukhari, in which the zakah should be object. If a person's raising cattle, his zakah should be cattle. Olive, olive. Dates, dates, and so on. Now let's leave that aside. The seventh hadith is the nearer and the nearer. The zakah should be given to the nearer and the nearer. Here you see Ahl al-Ma. It says the people gathered around the water that they usually use. Could be river, could be water well, could be. So zakah should be given to the people of that site or that village. Now let's leave this aside. We connect them later. Again, text from the book of Qas Al-Haq about this hadith. Now, the eighth right, it is the right of hospitality. This hadith from Bukhari and Muslim, that if a Muslim travels, he has the right to stay in the area where he reached, for 3 days. And if the people were generous, he can stay longer. Now, let's leave this aside. Now, we'll connect all those with Ibn al-Sabil, which is mentioned in the Quran 8 times. That the people who travel, they have the right to take from funds from Ayat al-Ghanaim, Sadaqat al-Fay, or the people can give them generously to travel. And it's amazing if one read the right of the traveler, that he doesn't have to be rich, he doesn't have to prove that he's traveling and so on. All push the people to travel. Now let's connect them together. Sorry for this noise. It seems there is wedding or something. Let's assume that there is a town, and I kind of think you can hear the noise, right? Let's assume that there is a town, and it is somehow saturated with employed people because the area does not support more working hands. Now, these days, because the government has all the resources, they can always invent new jobs and they can hire people. But if we implemented Sharia, then each site will have certain capacity to employ people, because people are not working in bureaucratic jobs. They are working in real jobs that produce goods. So let's say that there is people who are jobless. By the money of Ibn al-Sabil, the funds of Ibn al-Sabil, maybe he traveled to an area where there is cow breeding. When he goes there, because the people has to give their away zakah as objects, they will not transfer their cows to somewhere else. The cows has to stay there, unless there is no poor people to come. So when a poor person goes there, unemployed person goes there, he take the zakah. Next year later, he'll be a person paying a zakah. This means that this area here have the potentiality to take more or accept more working hands. Now let's say he didn't like it. He can still move to somewhere else where he can go for camel breeding. Let's say he didn't like it. He can move again to palm cultivation or again to olive cultivation. He keep moving around till he'll find a place that is promising for his skills, talent, in which he will start enjoying producing, and he managed to find good living conditions. So people in the Muslim world are moving around, then they settle. They move, settle, move, settle. Now, if one thinks of those processes, one will conclude the following: that most people will bump into a work that they enjoy and they like. At the same time, they are the owners of that work or partners in that work. Now, if one classify the levels of jobs in terms of employed, ownership, and so on, one can conclude that there is six levels. The first level is group of people who are unemployed, and that now you see them in the societies, the indicators of unemployment, 10%, 6%, 15%. So there is always within capitalism unemployed people. The second level is employed. A person is employed in a job that he or she hates. That's his destiny. The third is employed in a job that he or she may like. The fourth, employed in a job that he or she likes. The fifth, employs or work in a job that he or she owns or he is or she partner in, but may not like. The last one is a work in which, or a job in which that he or she owns or, or a partner, but enjoys. With Sharia, we should expect everybody to be in this level. These days, most people are here. Rarely you find people here and there. Now, what I'll say is a bit painful, and the metaphor I make is a bit annoying, but I'm forced to do it. Why? Because the fate of the Ummah and the fate of the earth and pollution is far more important than the feeling of some people. I make the metaphor here that the Islamic finance or economy, what they call it, Islamic finance or economy, one can say it is an Islamic pork soup. Why? Now let's assume that, I know it's painful, but I have to say it. Maybe create discussion and so on. Let's say that I want to make a soup and I have a pig, and if that pig is slaughtered by referring to Islamic teachings, then all the ingredients of the soup are halal, the onion, the oil, except the pork meat. We cooked it. What happens? The shortening or the fat of the meat will spoil the whole soup. We cannot drink it. Now, what's happening now, the money that is collected from those people within the capitalist system that closes the door, and remember last time we said resources, permissions, knowledge, those are not in the hands of the people. And some people took advantage of those, and they are very rich. They are the meat of the soup. Those rich guys are now, we are taking their money and we are trying to create a system, economic system, that make it somehow Islamic. So what is named Islamic finance or economy is the conventional capitalist economy injected with Islamic values. Now, if one look at what they call Islamic finance or economy, it's basically stands on three pillars. The first is the stipulation that is quite difficult to prove. It is basically values, so people should not cheat, should not monopolize others, they should not take advantage of their positions, and so on. And this is difficult to control. The second stipulation is that, or pillar, is that there is things that the society can control, like fighting usury, alcohol, drugs, and their industry. Now, I have no problem with these two. It is Islamic, obviously. The problem lies with the third pillar, which is collecting the money of those people who made it without using Islam, without using hukuk. They have surplus. That surplus has to be invested again. So they have these banks or Masarif Islamiyya, in which a group of people sitting between the investors are here and the people who want to work to make investment are there. So these banks come in the middle between both. And usually they finance others to buy things or to rent things or to help them financially and they will participate with them in profit in factories, in trade, and so on. Now, there is an important issue here, which is the following. Usually it takes me one whole semester to teach the students the difference between ownership and control, because their ramification in the long run is very difficult to comprehend. If you ask anybody, he'll tell you the difference between control and ownership. The same with the fuqaha. If you ask them what is the difference between ihtijar, ihya, iqta, ikhtitat, they know the difference. But the accumulation of the differences in decision-making process in the long run, that's another story. The same here, economists who talk about Islamic finance, they didn't see that this body, the bank between the investors and the people, is a barrier for transmitting knowledge between the two sides. And that has a severe implication in the economy, in prosperity. That's explained in the book. I cannot explain it here. So we have a body of people sitting in the middle. Not only they are not doing anything for the society except paperwork, but hindering the progress of knowledge. Now, I have no problem of naming it as transitional economy or whatever, but let's not call it Islamic, because that makes those people who made the money through hukuk that's not Islamic, make them feel that they are fine. They have no problem. Yet their money is very questionable. So let's not call it Islamic, let's call it something else. Now, if we think of the method of production, there is this well-known argument about Weber. He argued that capitalist system developed in the West because of the ideology of Protestant and so on, you know that. But if one look at that, basically it is collecting money to invest them. And if you look at the Quran, infaq, anfiqu, and its derivatives is mentioned 73 times. So why Islam says spend, spend, spend? And that's totally against Weber's argument that collect, 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 which leads to prosperity through capitalism. Now, there is 5 types of, I'll explain. There is 5 types of partnership that deal with the issue that left economists puzzled, which is شركة المضاربة, or the company of مضاربة, أبدان, وجوه, عنان, مفاوضة. These needs, some of them may translate it, some need translation like مفاوضة. These 5 types leads to an efficiency in production and equity in distribution. These 2 issues puzzled so many scholars in the West. I made an exercise in which I put a situation of a river with fishermen with nets. And I made a scenario by referring to those types of partnership to come up with the conclusion that, difficult to explain, that those types of partnership will lead to a maximum efficiency with higher equity and distribution. How is that happening? Let me explain. Now, if you remember last time, we talked briefly about this book, The Machine That Changed the World, how the Americans, when they realized that the Japanese cars are much better with lower price, and they sent a team to study, and they come up with this idea of lean production. Now, if we look at the Islamic hukuk, obviously, if one works for himself and avoid interventions by others, that's the best situation. If he's a carpenter, bakery shop, and so on. But making complicated things like car and microphone, computers, needs the cooperation of different people. So here we have the Quran telling us it's better to work for yourself. فيه شركاء متشاكسون خلطاء ليبغي بعضهم على بعض. At the same time, there is أنا ثالث الشريكين hadith. I am the third partner, God saying I'm the third partner if two partners working together. Now imagine what happens if two partners work together honestly. Their third partner is God. Now this hadith is رواه Abu Dawood, Al-Bayhaqi. Al-Albani said it is weak hadith, ضعيف. Now let's put together that أنفقوا, spend, that the people will do the things that they like, that the people travel, they bump into a place where there is car manufacturing or whatever. The car will be dismantled into parts that each group of people interested in battery, in wheels, in glass, they work together and they make conventions among themselves. Some design the car, then the car come as product of those disciplines. This how it was before Fordism. Somebody designed the car, other people do certain parts, then somebody put them together. But that time that there were no very well developed conventions. What I'm arguing that with Sharia, if people settle and they like what they do, they are constantly thinking of it. They are constantly trying to solve problems, to connect with each other, to produce a car. Now let's connect this with the following. If you remember last time we talked about خطط مكانية or spatial خطة or territorial structure, and this was in Arabic. This time I made it in English, and I argued this. I said that this is a house. They share a dead end street. This is as one خطة or territorial zone is controlled by the people living in it, and خطة is an area that controlled by the people living in it. So this is one خطة. This خطة C with خطة when it's get together, it's B3. So B1, B2, B3 makes another larger خطة, and all together we make the largest خطة. Now this does not mean that those people who control things in that can stop people from coming and reviving lands outside their خطة. That's possible. And if you remember, we talked about gates, that if the خطة means that the people inside living in it are in control, we should expect gates. So these are some pictures of gates, additional pictures of towns, villages, okay? But this is very much different, and if one asks, I will explain it, than our contemporary gated communities. There is much difference. If you ask, I'll explain that, inshallah. Now what I will show is very risky, but still I'll do that because I'm hoping that I'll receive some of your criticism. And it is not a mapping. It is not a drawing of inventions. It's not my inventions. It is mapping of what I found in terms of rights. I put my email here, so please, if you have criticism, send me your criticism, please. So a nation state usually is composed of a loyalty خطة, which is the political boundary, and a production خطة, and a spatial خطة. All those three types of خطas or territories are in fact one. And this is the individuals inside the khitta. So the nation state is usually composed of, this is one nation state, another nation state, third nation state. People can go between America and Europe. People in Europe can go to Africa, but Africans cannot come back. And sometimes there is a production khitta. Please note the colors. This is loyalty khitta or political structure in the nation state. This is the blue production khitta. This is the yellow spatial khitta or residential or where they live, where they work. Now, if you note the colors, that maybe these days people working in computer application from different countries, they work together in the cloud. But usually they have to work to produce physical things, car, milk. They have to work in one of those khittas or one of those nation state. Now, this is where it gets a bit dangerous. Now, what is an ummah? According to the hukuk that I found in Qas Al-Haq, that this is an ummah. This is the boundary of the ummah. So people can go in and out from the ummah. During the Prophet time, people could walk in and out. Merchants go in and out. There was no taxes levied on them. But then during Umar ibn al-Khattab's reign, they told the Caliph that the non-Muslims taking 1/10 ushur from our trade, we should take the same. He said, okay. So treatment is on the same level. So this is a khitta. And this is a region, let's say Al-Hijaz, Iraq, Tunis. Still people can move. Nobody can stop them from moving. Now, this is a town or city, Taif, Mecca, Istanbul. And within that, there is quarters, which is, if you remember this one, or this one, depending on which level we are talking about. So this is abstract. Now, these are haras, if you like. I'm sure you will have questions. We might come back to this slide later. Now the Quran says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وإن طائفتان من المؤمنين اقتتلوا فأصلحوا بينهما فإن بغت إحداهما على الأخرى فقاتلوا التي تبغي حتى تفيء إلى أمر الله. What does this mean? That if these two khittas fought each other, the verse described them as mu'minin. And if one of them, bagat, one of them did not respect the rulings, bagat إحداهما الأخرى فقاتلوا للتبغي. فقاتلوا للتبغي means fight the one that is not compelling. Compelling to what? This means that there is a reference that refer to, which is حقوق, which is Quran, which is Sunnah, Hadith. This means that always those khittas has to be as powerful as possible, because fighting is worship. Al-amal al-askari ibadah. People always has to learn how to fight. They should have their own weapons. My argument is that to create an ordered ummah that is settled and powerful, because there is no rules and regulations. However, there is huquq that leads conventions. The only way, if you think of it, and I hope you will argue with me later, is to have khittas, loyalty khittas that are very powerful, and special khittas, because they overlap sometimes, very powerful to the level that the Caliph, if you remember that time, said there is no funds in the Ministry of Finance, Beit al-Mal, and therefore he doesn't have people to hire to work for him, and the people has to work for him voluntarily, as it happened with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. By the way, somebody asked me a question. He said, well, the Prophet dig the Khandaq around Medina, غزوة الأحزاب, غزوة الخندق. The Prophet provided water. He did that by encouraging the people to do it. He did not tax the people to make the ditch, the Khandaq, during غزوة الخندق. He did not buy the بئر Roma, the water well of Roma, by taxing people. He encouraged the people who will come, guys, and buy this water well. Uthman bin Affan did it. He did not build the mosque in Medina by taxing the people. The people willingly did it. Remember that when the people, the Muhajirin came from Mecca, they came without their properties. They came poor. In no time, they became well off because the doors of resources, knowledge, and permission were opened for them. There were no restrictions, so they became wealthy. Now, here in this case, we should expect that those wealthy people are in themselves very well, and they will be powerful. And at that case, it is almost impossible that they fight each other, and I'll say why. They only fight each other if the Caliph took the resources and he became weak, as it happened with the Abbasis, with the Qaramita, when they were gangs, stopping people going and coming, thieving them and so on. Gradually, they become big gang. But if the people were powerful, this would never happen. If the people in Algeria were armed, the French could never colonize them. I think we'll come back to this because there is so much I did not explain because of time. Now, this one is led by the Caliph. This one is led by a person appointed by the Caliph, or the people will elect him from those khitta. The people there has loyalty to an imam in mosque, or a doctor, very well-known doctor, who helps people, or a figure, popular figure, becomes their leader. From those leaders, one becomes the leader of those. Either he could be appointed by the Caliph to the different khittas, region, cities, and it goes to quarters and so on. And if one look at the history of the Muslim, he'll find both ways. The Caliph appoints people. Sometimes the people reject the person appointed by the Caliph. Then the Caliph change his mind and appoint the one that they choose. So both ways are available. Now, in both cases, it doesn't make much difference because strength is in the hands of the people always, and they are righteous. Why? Somebody asked, I'll explain that. Now, let's say that this is a khitta, loyal khitta. In this loyal khitta, we could find a special khitta, the yellow. Within that special khitta, there is production khittas. And some people in this khitta, their loyalty might be somewhere else. If I go to a mosque, I don't like the reading of the imam, I go to another mosque. Gradually, if the people move to that, as if we are voting that we don't like this imam, gradually he will be replaced. So the system in itself of people following what they like, whom they like, gradually pulls the people up, just like these days with Instagram and so on. Some people have millions, some people not exactly the same, but just to explain the idea. Now here we have a special khitta in which a group of people, let's say they are manufacturing motorcycles, and one of them may be belonging to another khitta. So it's very important for these three khittas not to be overlapping like the nation state. Then, my argument, and only then, the people will be alive. And those alive people will make alive ummah. So in summary, establishing rights through human rationality does the following. Through human rationality, which is human-made. constitutions, elections, rules, regulations, bureaucracy, interventions that will change rights, leading to stratification, poverty, etc. Sharia does it differently through hukuk. I leave this to you guys to read. Let me see the time. Almost there, okay? This one, if we have time, we will come back to it, but please see episode, if you know Arabic, 126. It is a verse from the Quran, ليتخذ بعضهم بعضا سخرية, from آية الزخرف. It was used by some ulama that our societies, the Muslim society, should be stratified. But it's clear in this version, in this verse, this is the translation, that no. Look at the ayah, what it says. It says, وَرَفَعْنَا بَعْضَهُمْ فَوْقَ بَعْضٍ دَرَجَاتٍ لِيَتَّخِذَ بَعْضُهُم بَعْضًا سُخْرِيًّا. As if this is a punishment, not a reward. Then it says, وَرَحْمَةُ رَبِّكَ خَيْرٌ مِمَّا يَجْمَعُونَ. I'll finish now, just 2 minutes. Then the verse describes those people who were سخرية, who were classified. لَجَعَلْنَا لِمَنْ يَكْفُرُ بِالرَّحْمَنِ لِبُيُوتِهِمْ سُقُفًا مِّن فِضَّةٍ. We will make their houses, their ceilings out of silver. Now he said, why he said سُقُفًا? سُقُفًا is the plural of the plural. سُقُفًا is the plural of أسقف, which is the plural of سقف. Now imagine that a house or a building that has roofs made of silver. أسقف. And groups of those أسقف make سقف, which means a class of people. Their roofs are made of silver. The roof is made of silver, which means they are moving on silver on the upper floors because it's the ground floor or the ground of the ceiling of the lower floor. وَمَعَارِجَ عَلَيْهَا يَظْهَرُونَ. And staircase that in which they go up, and those staircases are from gold and silver. وَلِبُيُوتِهِمْ أَبْوَابًا وَسُرًا عَلَيْهَا تَكُونَ. This is very important. Their houses, rooms, bayt means room, okay, in the classical Arabic. Their rooms has doors and sofas and beds in which they are reclining. They're sitting just like that. They don't work. Which means what? They're a class of people who is monopolizing others, and they don't produce anything except monopolizing wealth and cannoning around to control more and more wealth to make more and more profit. Now, this is the last verse which I'll share with you. ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر. Why the Quran says ظهر الفساد في البر والبحر? During the Prophet time, the people were few millions in the whole earth, and there was no pollution because it was already there in Rome, ruling without God's rule, ruling with their wisdom, with human rationality, which leads to rules, regulations, and different set of hukuk than what Islam gave us. What is the cost of one column of those? So the original idea was already there, which is democracy, which is rationality. Now one will say, democracy. Somebody asks, Islam gave us more freedom than democracy. Then the result is, this is from northern Pakistan, South Afghanistan. Every single centimeter is utilized in this picture. Compare it with this picture to see the situation of the Ummah now. Look at these two extreme mentalities. I took this picture in 85. This lady makes less than $50 a day breaking bricks to make it gravel for concrete, and the parliament is made of concrete. The whole parliament made of concrete. Extravagance or wasting wealth and the resources of society by the decision makers sometimes can be very clear, like the pyramids here. Sometimes you have to look for it. For example, this is in Amsterdam. This is in Stockholm. And look at this, only engineer understand this. This is cantilevered bench. To build it, maybe 4 guys sit here, 400 kilograms. This has to go down deep with a column or U shape. A small column will solve the problem. Why do it that way? Just wasting money. This is very interesting. I'll stop here, but if you want, I'll continue, Mr. Professor Osama. Do you give me 3 or 4 minutes, or should I stop?
بارك الله فيكم. جزاكم الله خيرا. I mean, I would leave it to your discretion, maybe another 3 or 4 minutes if you would like. This is all very interesting, but it's also going to generate huge numbers of questions and a lot of discussion. So I leave it to your discretion as you wish.
Oh, just 3 minutes.
No problem.
Now, if we understood what I was trying to say, that usually we often, whether, as I talked in Islamic, what they call Islamic finance, architects, planners, all disciplines, mostly because we did not put hukuk in the center, there is misunderstanding. For example, professionals in planning and architecture, they don't concentrate on this, which is hukuk, how it interacts with financial capabilities of the people, socio-cultural, political structure, environmental capabilities, topography, climate. All these interact with hukuk, and through what I call process, gave us this end product of the past. Now the architect look at those nostalgically, they filter them, and they create this type of environment. These type of environments that we look upon from the past is created by those people who have different technical capabilities than us. We have much higher technical capability. So nostalgically, we're going to the past. And the result, this that we call Islamic architecture sometimes. The overpass, for example, this is a housing project won the Aga Khan Award. This is an overpass that was imitated by the architect from the past and reused. If we gave the people the power in the site to decide, not a foreign body, maybe the people will decide to have something like this and as an overpass. So these things I call juhr dab, like lizard burrows. Among them, I've seen a few days ago an interview by a guy. He was talking about Ansanat al-Makan, how to make the space more human. Basically, they're taking Western tools of design by using extravagant materials to make very fancy places. That is the money of the poor. This guy was in one of the Gulf states. That is the money of the poor people in Bangladesh, in Mauritania. So because we're not ruling with Islam, the result is that we are making the situation worse. It is getting worse because we are only looking at the end product, not the process that created the end product. Finally, if you remember last time I explained these 2 slides, those slides, if you read them, it gives you more idea, are now with Ummatics site. They will have the slides presentation of this session and the last session in Ummatics presentation. And finally, I leave these also 3 slides, which is describing each chapter of the book of Qas Al-Haq, the title and subtitle, and then each chapter rotate around a verse from the Quran or Hadith. Thank you.
Jazakumullah khairan, Dr. Jamil, for really just giving us so much, in some respects, in the most positive sense, provocation to think about the problems that the Ummah is facing. This is precisely what we want at Ummatics Institute, to think about the current systems, the global systems that have, to use again, in the spirit of the discussion, to use a slightly provocative term, have infected our ways of thinking and the paradigms with which we analyze the world. And suddenly we are creating these kind of Frankenstein monsters like quote unquote Islamic economics or Islamic finance, or I mean, perhaps the most oxymoronic name of all, Islamic banking. And I think this will sort of elicit a lot of questions. It has already elicited a lot of questions, but I want to maybe start off with a sort of counter provocation of my own. You're a scholar who's been thinking about this for many decades at this point in time, but the critique that is leveled at theorists is always, well, this is all high theory. How practical, how realistic is any of this? And at Ummatics, we are largely scholars coming together, but we recognize that critique is very valid and very serious, that we need to bring something that is going to elicit that change. Perhaps I can ask this or frame this through another sort of critical thinker from the Western tradition, who also comes from MIT, of course, and perhaps a scholar you study with, Noam Chomsky, who is an anarcho-syndicalist. So he's someone quite far on the left-leaning sort of spectrum. And he is often asked, or has been asked in the past, well, what would the anarchist model that you call for look like? And his response is, well, it's not my job to define that. This is an incremental process. And we can critique the system as it currently stands, but where is it going to end up? That's only going to be realized through actual practice. And so I want to ask you, you've written obviously a very elaborate critique, but also I suspect quite a lot of construction of alternative paradigms. How do you respond to that sort of critique that, well, this is all theory, how do you enact any of this, especially when there's so much hostility to these sorts of ideas?
Well, maybe the first step is to bring awareness to the issue of hukuk and test what Jamil is saying. Does hukuk, if we connect them together, work or no? If they work, then the next step, how do you go about it to implement that?
Right.
But I believe that Islam has something maybe others don't accept, that has an interesting strategy. It's amazing for me. If people know their rights, they will take it. And if you remember that when the Americans invaded Iraq, in Fallujah, the people had no weapons, nothing. Immediately they armed themselves. They started to defend themselves. In Cairo, when during the Arab Spring, they released the criminals from jails and so on. Immediately, the people in the community, they assigned guys to protect the community. So if people were aware of their rights, don't you think that they will take it? Look at the guys who throw themselves in the sea to migrate from Northern Africa or Africa to Europe. Wouldn't you think that they will move goods between countries if they know that they are not smuggling and that's their rights? Wouldn't you think that people will go some places, dig the ground to extract gold? And that's happening in in southern Egypt. And the government are fighting them, taking them as prisoners, that you are stealing the gold of the state. If they know that gold is their right, and if they are killed, they are martyrs, they will go ahead and fight for it. The thing is that they are not aware of their rights. The minute they become aware of their rights, they will take it. In that case, either these governments will change their attitude or they fall. What happened with the Arab Spring, they gathered in one place, Rab al-Adawiya in the center, and waiting for the government to kill them. But if they are distributed all over, this guy taking fish without permission, this guy digging well for water, this guy, I am reviving a land. There is so much land. Why do you stop me? Gradually, this understanding, if it's absorbed by the people, they will act. Then we should expect the societies to change. Gradually, then the Khilafah will come. Now, the Khilafah is our destiny, and I think it will come. It is coming. But how does it come? from philosophy, from theorizing, or is it from the people when they move and act? And here I think we should concentrate at this stage on awareness. So that's my answer.
Right, no, I think that's a very plausible and reasonable, given the circumstances, answer, in the sense that we the power is highly concentrated. This is another theme that I will come back to, and I will also address people's questions. I just want to remind everyone that you can keep on asking questions. We have a fairly rich list of questions already, but I will turn to them in a moment. But I just wanted to say, yes, in a sense, raising awareness is one of the key sort of responsibilities, I think, that you've taken up as a matter of urgency over the course of your life, and dedicated your career to it. And I hope that my generation of scholars and future generations of scholars recognize the crucial importance of that. I think the challenge in some respects, and I would love to get your thoughts on this, is that once your head rises above the parapet, that's when powerful entities will come and try to destroy you. And we can, in some respects, critique the strategy adopted by the people at M.Arch.A.S, for example. And I've actually written a book about this, and I'm very sort of sympathetic to the plight of those people. But unless you, in a sense, challenge the system directly, you are very likely to be ignored. So I would be interested to think about with you at some point, and if you feel you would like to respond to this now, like, how do you find that balance between overtly and very clearly challenging the system and therefore being crushed by the system because it feels threatened, versus transforming it gradually through raising of awareness, almost imperceptibly, that the sort of discourse shifts over time, and now suddenly we cannot simply accept, for example, so Joe Biden's America, forgive me for quoting sort of Genocide Joe, but on economic policy, there's been a shift in the Democratic Party, and it's shifted kind of because of people like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. Even though Joe Biden is a very centrist Democrat in domestic policy, he has shifted to more sort of left-oriented economic policy. Is that the sort of shift? And again, forgive me for that analogy, but is that the sort of shift that you would be more encouraging of, the sort of discursive shift that takes place and takes the entire society with them, or political class with them? Or would you say that more subversive action in small groups is the sort of thing that some people need to think about?
Okay, first, so a question here. Let me respond to that very quickly. He's asking about books that I could recommend about Islamic city and so on, about economy. A good book about Muhammad Shabra. He won the King Faisal Award. It's original English, translated to Arabic. It's a very good book. However, in criticizing Western economy, however, my disagreement with that book is that it runs with the system of nation state, that they should be nation state that control the currency and so on. Another book is Muhammad Baqir al-Sadr Iqtisaduna, and that book's problem is that there is opinion that 20% or fifth the money should go to the religious elite or the ruling class, and I cannot understand how an economy can flourish with taking away 20%. Now, going back to your question, of course, there is many other books, but these are two. Now, maybe now there is new books. I didn't read in economy in the last 10 years. Regarding your question, which is, I think, basically facing authorities or distributing the task, temporal or regional. I think that was the question, if I understood well.
Yes, broadly.
Yeah, and I think facing the authorities is a big mistake, because they are armed. The people are not armed. But if using the situation, but through people's awareness, people acting in different places differently. Usually, the army less than 5% of the population, if not much, much less, sometimes even 1%. How can they control the people if the people act? But this is the problem. The people are not acting because the ulama telling them this is not your right. The minute they know their rights, and this is the obligation, I think, of the elite. If they agree with those ideas, by the way, I did not bring anything from my pocket. This is Sharia. They are four ulama: Malik, Al-Shafi, Ahmad, Abu Hanifa. If three of them said something, the fourth said something else, different opinion, I go with the three. If they are divided 2-2, I go with the second class of فقهاء, like ابن قدامة, الحنبلي, الكاساني, أبو الحنفي, ابن عبد البر, مالكي, النووي, الشافعي. So I go with the second class. For sure, they will side with this, will side with these two or these two. Always I found that the majority are right, except in one thing, in partnership, الشركة. Each school of law has its own madhab. I found the four of them are right. Why? Because, like a creature, efficiency, equity, efficiency, equity. Creature, the economy, like a creature walking, this foot efficiency, this is equity. They do that. So as long as the society is far away from the central state and they are ruling by Islam, they are fine. Some people ask me sometimes, which madhab do we follow? I say, any madhab you follow is fine. No problem. The differences between them, they look major, but they are very, very minor. If you want, I'll give you an example. It takes 5 minutes to explain. The differences between them, very, very minor. Very minor. They look very different. But if you put them in the larger picture, it's very, very minor. So I think to answer your question is not to face the state. It is impossible. The state is very, very powerful. And gradually the state will be convinced and it will lose its power. But if somebody came and said, I'll fight back, and people joined him to fight the state, I don't know. Maybe we're creating another ISIS. I don't know. Excuse me. These questions beyond my.
No, that's perfectly understandable. That's perfectly understandable. I mean, I think one of the challenges that arises, and this is what some sort of ulama have expressed, is that the state being so powerful in our own time, it also has the power to indoctrinate on a vast scale, and so and to direct the scholarly elite to behave in a certain way or convey a certain message. So I think that is a major impediment to change, because to give an example, in the West, I sometimes think about the fact that Islamophobic discourses are pervaded in Western media on such a scale that it's extremely important for Muslims to try and clarify and to try and show themselves as subject to Islamophobic prejudice. But the right-wing press is so pervasive that it's kind of it's fighting a fire hose with a trickle, so to speak, in the other way. And so I think the practical question does create a certain blockage, but I don't want to necessarily, I mean, these are also sometimes sensitive questions to address in our political context, so I don't want to raise it any further than you would be comfortable talking about.
But let me respond with the following.
Mm-hmm.
The issues that you are raising and other issues are quite important in the Western culture.
Yeah.
And resolving it, I don't know whether it will change the Muslim world and create ummah or no. I think the issues that should be discussed that will influence the creation of ummah should come within and from the Muslim states. So I usually notice that the type of discourse issues that we care here in the Muslim world is a bit different than the ones there. Yani, for example, you cannot touch there in the Western culture a discussion with others about taxi. taxing, they will say
Oh,
it's impossible. You are trying to make revolution and so on.
right.
Unless you explain to them issues about Sharia and so on.
Right. So let me shift gears in that case and take some of these questions from the audience members. And some of these are comments, but I think it would be beneficial to take your thoughts on this. So, a couple of audience members appreciated your critique of the industry of Islamic finance and banking. And one of them talks about an interview of Harith Irfan, who has written a book on this called Is Islamic Banking Really Islamic? I believe, an insider's view. But there's also a comment about limited liability. So this is apparently a quote taken from Thomas Piketty's work of 2014. Limited liability was invented to fund high-risk long-distance shipping to cut out Muslim traders on the Silk Route. And it was considered, limited liability was considered an outrageous sin by the church when it was invented. I've heard contemporary scholars also sort of critique that, but it's such a sort of essential part of contemporary economic thinking that you need the limited liability corporation to be able to successfully engage in business. And this is also part of Timur Quran's sort of critique of Islamic legal norms. One I assume you will be familiar with in sort of his long divergence. So I wonder, drawing on this comment, whether you think there are deficiencies as alleged by scholars like Timur Quran within Islamic models of economic practice and business practice. And whether they can compete in contemporary sort of economic.
But I haven't read his book. What is his argument?
So simplifying very considerably, and I mean, he basically. I'm not very well read on his book, so I feel somewhat sort of reluctant to simplify this even. But with that caveat, this is a scholar, I believe, at Rice University. He's a very respected economist who basically has argued that the Muslim world regressed economically because they didn't develop the limited liability corporation and the sort of what's it called, the system of share-based company.
This is it's long subject. I made an interview with Aram about شركة الوجوه. شركة الوجوه is a partnership. If it's used, you don't need liability, تأمين, and so on.
Right.
What is the شركة الوجوه? It's not like Facebook, but it is face trading, face partnership, in which trust is created from a person who is well known to a person who is not known, khamil. So if one look at trade, how it moves from one trader to another, it's difficult to explain, but go and see an episode about this. It's Aram. It's in Arabic. It needs this needs a whole session. How goods move from point to point through شركة الوجوه without being damaged. And then if there is damage, the people usually they have systems of cooperating to solve it. That's much better than creating a whole system like in the West that will create bureaucracy for people who eat and drink without producing goods for the society. And that's very important. Let me give this example, or it may take 3 minutes. It's okay. Let's say that there is two societies. In each society, or two villages. In each village, there is 100 person. Now, each person will eat one bread a day. The society that has no bureaucracy and everybody is producing, okay? Each one has to produce one bread, so he has to work maybe 1 hour. The other society in which there is bureaucracy, and I counted that in فصل القذف بالغيب, sometimes it reaches 50% in some professions in the states like medicine and so on. And these professions that are producing goods, not like lawyers, the whole system that you can get rid of, jails, lawyers, courts, judges, and so on. Anyhow, so if 50% of that other society is bureaucrats, the other 50, to feed them, has to produce each 2 breads. So they have to work 2 hours. Sharia leads to a system in which it eliminates all those services that can be reduced or lived without. Of course, problems could happen. For example, the banking system will be replaced with a system that creates trust between manufacturers, traders, and so on, without the need for this huge monopolizing system of banking. Of course, some banks, masrafs, may go bankrupt in the Islamic system. That's possible. But it's very small and in very small located area and not major that creates bank run. So if we deal with Islam, with Sharia and Hukuk, that doesn't mean it's always heaven. There will be some problems here and there, but it is manageable. We always should look at it from this perspective. But if we take Ta'min, for example, or such issues as a major, and we feed them with more and more power in the society, they become richer, they become more active, more defensive of their rights that they created. At the end, the society is composed of people working for others, as it is now.
Barakallahu feekum. I mean, just to clarify, he, I think, talks less about insurance and more about joint stock companies. But I think the principles of the unfortunate reality is books like this, when they're written by a respected economist who, in my view, has a very limited grasp, because he's coming out of an economics department as well, a fairly limited grasp of the complexity of Islamic law, and he decides to write a book about Islam. Sorry about the noise. When he writes a book about Islamic law, then there will be these kind of very large claims which are unjustifiable. So, Barakallahu Fikum, I think it's unfortunately been a relatively influential book, and so that's why I raised it. Someone else asked on a unrelated note, and this is, I think, an important question that underlies kind of your the model with which you're working in terms of bringing the Sharia into operation. Dr. Jamil seems to assume that people are going to act righteously and thus can be trusted to carry out the burden of decision making instead of an elected government, or indeed an unelected government. But how does one make people righteous? How does one make them desire to behave in conformity with the Sharia, to come to know the Sharia, to learn their rights in accordance, in conformity with the Sharia?
Well, Qas Al-Haq does not depend that the people should be righteous to work. Now, there is hudud. If somebody thieves, his hand will be chopped and so on. There is hudud. If the people know that these hudud will be implemented, they don't have to be righteous to act. People like to revive lands. People like to take resources without permission. People like to make factories, farms, and so on. This is their livelihood. So they act to take it. And Sharia, وهو خير الفاصلين, does not put them in situation that they will collide. That's very rare. Now we see that because governments are controlling the resources, so the people are fighting for the few resources given by the state. So if resources are open, people will not fight for it. So they don't have to be righteous. They can. That's why I said it's in the beginning, in the last session, I said if there is student in the street, the people living around it, they own it. If they're Muslims, they pray in it. If they're non-Muslims, maybe they drink alcohol and dance in it. But the consequences of that, that if they want to light the street, they don't have to have cable in the street like we do now with the municipality. They will light the street from electric source from their houses, and then the street will be lit. Let's say that you don't agree with me on this. The majority of people are looking for their livelihood with the least possible troubles. Those gradually, with opening doors in permission, resources, and knowledge, gradually their number, their percentage will increase in the society. Gradually, the society will move from being less human to more well uh, matured individuals, not necessarily Muslims. Here is something important. That doesn't mean implementing Islam means that all nations will be the same. I always, in my discussion, left values aside. I was concentrating on mechanisms. But then there is another layer. If Muslims and non-Muslims follow Islamic hukuk, then there is another layer that makes the Muslims in better situation, which is the values. Be nice to your neighbor, be nice to your parents, pay sadaqah other than zakah, help others, and so on. All these nice, beautiful teachings in Islam is another layer that makes the Muslim Ummah in much better position, leading other Ummahs.
Jazakumullah khair. I may wish to come back to some of the points you raised.
Let me add one more
Please.
thing. مخصوصة الحقوق or the people's right in Sharia is much related to the basic human tendencies. I explained this last time. People like to expand their properties. People like to avoid interventions by other. People like to inject their values in their livelihood and their. So Islam uses these basic human tendencies, innate, to push the society forward. I can't hear you.
Apologies, my sound went for a moment. So, Barakallah fikum. I wanted to ask another set of questions coming from the audience. One audience member is pointing out about contemporary sort of practices within Gulf countries in terms of economic diversification. And so many Gulf countries, of course, are heavily dependent on oil, and they're increasingly depending now on tourism, which, how does this... The question is, do you have any thoughts on Gulf countries encouraging tourism as a means of diversification in relation to the rights of Muslim travelers, as you've mentioned, and also in terms of the environmental impact of this sort of activity?
Well, I didn't understand the question well, but if I understood it, that what happens if some local people making their livelihood from tourism?
I think it's more asking in relation to the fact that you said people should have a certain degree of freedom of movement.
Yes.
From a Shari perspective. And, this is, in a sense, there's an imperative to have tourism in many of these countries that are dependent on oil, and it's increasingly being promoted. But it also happens to be of an economic class that is desirable to enter the country rather than free movement. And it also has the unfortunate implication of creating considerable carbon emissions. And so, is there an Islamically appropriate response to this sort of
Well, he or she describing a situation in which Islam is not implemented. This situation was created because Islam is not implemented. The state has all the money of the oil, spending it the way it likes, promoting tourism and so on. If we implement Islam, this will not happen. Why? I'm not saying tourism will not occur. Maybe people living next to the coastline, will have their hotels and so on to attract tourists. But because they will be the owners of that area, they will make sure it will not be polluted. Otherwise, they will not have tourists next year. So things will be operated differently. Now, what we are thinking of is that the government are in control and the people are not in control, and maybe some tourists come and pollute that area, or they create certain noises or so on, or they may create, let's say, somebody with strength of the government. He'll have a huge arena for music festival, and the neighbors are annoyed. This is happening because the people don't have the power to stop that. If we implement Islam, the people have the power in the side to stop such uh, events. So always we have to think in a situation where Islam is implemented. I always tell my student, don't tell me how Islam solves the problem of AIDS. AIDS was not created by following Islam. Okay, so the
But
same here. These problems that are raised these days are not created by Islam. If we implement Islam, then ask me, how does this work? You may ask me, how can you have a pipe to transport oil from the east coast to the west coast of the United States, for example? That is a reasonable question. I'll answer that. The answer is in the book. So there is two types of question. One that are the result of not implementing Islam. The other that what happens if we implement Islam? How, Jamil, you solve this contemporary need that was not there during the Prophet's day, sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
just to clarify, though, you're saying that a problematic that emerges out of a context that is, in a sense, un-Islamic or even anti-Islamic, if we are going to be Muslims in the 21st, or to use the Islamic calendar, the 15th century, do we not need to also confront those? Do we not also need to
They will
offer
disappear. They will
response?
disappear.
Do you think?
Give me an example of contemporary problem, and I'll try to tell you how it will disappear.
I mean, I think the problems raised by this person, the confluence of the climate crisis and the needs of economic diversification, or in the
Now, climate crisis already happened. If we implement Sharia, it doesn't go
yeah,
tomorrow.
precisely.
Yeah, the earth has to clean itself. Gradually, it will clean itself. Yani Islam is not miracle
Right,
that solves what 500 years of
right,
misuse created.
right. So that's, I mean, that's a good clarification in the sense that this is not a panacea. This is saying this is how you live in conformity with divine law, but also with natural justice in a sense, and you have to allow for the sort of adjustments to take place that will slowly clear the system, and that may take, as you suggest, maybe hundreds of years,
Oh
because
no, 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 no,
the
no, not,
damage has been
not
done.
necessarily. No, I don't think so. I think
Okay.
if the people knew their rights,
Yeah.
they will move, and in few generations, the ummah will be created.
Inshallah.
The ummah will be created if the people knew their rights. They will move.
Right.
They will not accept this misery that they are living in. But they don't know. This is the problem. They don't know. And the elite of the governments, the ulama, helping the
Yeah.
states to keep the people away from their rights.
Subhanallah. Nas'alullah salam al afiyah. Let me ask you a bit about this. Comes out of another question, which in a sense queries or problematizes your theory of human nature. The person simply sort of is asking, if people are left to to take their own rights, they will collide and kill. This is a Hobbesian view of human
You
nature.
did not understand
Hmm.
last week and this week's session. I keep saying again and again
Yeah.
that there is مقصوصة الحقوق, that there is rights, systems of rights that
Yeah.
fills the vacuum that could happen.
Right. So, so in your view, there's not really much else to add there. Um, so the next question that I have, There are actually quite a few, so I'm struggling to keep up with the. Jazakumullah khairan for everyone sending in these questions, but please bear with me as I try and bring them up. So, someone asks, applying the Islamic legal system to achieve huquq can't be separated from doctrine, so it can't be promoted as a separate system, because, for example, society will have to perform the duties of the police. For example, society will have to perform duties of the police and army as an act of worship, not a paid job. The only way for non-Muslims to benefit from huquq is within a Muslim society. This is more of a comment than a question, but I suppose one question that comes out of this is there any, do you have anything to comment on how the project of Qas Al-Haq, does it have anything for Muslims living outside of Darul Islam to think about in particular? Or is this how do those roles differ for Muslims in terms of thinking about Sharia-based rights? Because obviously we're not operating within those sorts of jurisdictions, those of us in non-Muslim countries.
Well, first of all, as you know, and I don't blame you, yani, that living, it's unique situation now that living مما عمت به البلوى, living among non-Muslims is not
It's not the asl.
recommended in Islam. It's not recommended in Islam.
Yes, absolutely.
So again, we are trying to judge something that is unusual, yani. But it happened. So I'm not saying that you there should revolt. No, no. Of course, you have to live there. Them, they hosted you. You pay taxes and so on. They may change. I don't know. But in the book, I think 7 or 8 situations. I show the different situations: Muslims living among non-Muslims, non-Muslims living among Muslims, and the ruler is that. So there is different situation. Each situation I give what could happen, but the recommended situation is to live among Muslims. Now, the question I think that you read is about amenities, about infrastructure, about that how it could be resolved if the people are not paying taxes. When you were reading the question, that was my understanding, and that the Western type of amenities, infrastructure, we cannot live without it these days, and it is important. And it cannot be provided without funds that the state take taxes, then the state invest those taxes in providing infrastructure, education, hospitals, roads, street lights, sewage, and so on, infrastructure. To answer this, it is in the externalities. Now, the state usually provide 2 things: security, defending the nation from outside, plus keeping the society safe from criminals and so on. Security, outside, inside, plus providing services, amenity. Now, usually, who does these amenities and services? Usually, it's companies hired by the state. Who asphalt the road? Who build the lamps in the street? Who builds the school? It is companies. Within the Islamic Sharia, if we implement Islam, the people are the rich because there is no rich state. So the wealth that is supposed to be with the state is in the hands of the people. In that case, there will be a role for the architect and the planner under the umbrella of the people. So as you bought your Wi-Fi service from a company, that case the people will bring companies to pave for them their roads, their electric supply, and so on. Now, let's remember, within implementing Islam, if we did, we could have reached to the decentralized generation of energy long time ago. Why? Because the new companies that are emerging in the West are, because they are centralized, they always try to control the infrastructure for themselves. So the cables in the street are owned by the government, installed by the companies. In that case, if the people have to do it themselves, they will try to think to generate electricity in the site. So we could have had renewable energy long time ago, but we didn't have the chance for that. So the people, if they control those companies, and one thing else, those companies are not monopolized. Now, the internet companies are very few with the permission of the state. With Islamic Sharia, it's not controlled. Group of active guys with finance from others, they can make their own companies and they will compete, and that will bring the price down with higher quality. So what happens is that companies will provide those services. Even more, the Awqaf, as I said last time, will provide those services like schools, hospitals, and so on. And those uh, hospitals, schools, under the supervision of the people who are donating always for this thing to run. Now it is, because of the state's control, it is somehow depleted. It is not as efficient as if it was from companies. That's why the private sector is always much efficient than governments. Imagine this private sector is not monopolized and it's under the control of the people who want the service. I'm not saying that each person go and dig the ground to bring water to. No, I'm saying companies will be created to do that. But from the outset, the people will live in places, revive places that has water. Now, cities like Riyadh, they bring the water from all the way. Uh, Other cities, Amman, there is no water. So everybody is screaming from water scarcity. But with land relocation, with mineral relocation, people will always settle in places that has the potential for survival. Then we should expect sustainability to continue.
Can I mean, ask? These are questions that arise in policy debates within sort of democracies very commonly. I have lived most of my life in the UK, and there's always been this question between nationalization of certain industries versus sort of leaving them to the private sector.
Gotcha.
And in some respects, and there's also a discussion about certain sectors having natural monopolies in some respects. So water provision is considered something of a natural monopoly in the UK, and is thought to be better run by some people on the political left by the government, because otherwise leaving a company to take over a natural monopoly will incentivize the sort of the worst practices of monopoly economics that one can imagine, and that has happened in places like the US to a certain extent, and places like the UK. Now, I mean, my question is that, you know, the challenge with a natural monopoly, like the rail lines or railway system, is
Tragedy of the common. Tragedy of the common, right?
sorry.
You are trying to explain the tragedy of the common.
The tragedy of the commons, what you elaborated in your first lecture, to a certain extent, I believe, is that. But the tragedy of the commons is the phrase. You're far better informed of this than I am. How do you realize this kind of? How do you manage this reality that not every community can set up their own railway system, for example? So you do need a state entity or companies to do this, and I wonder sort of what your response is.
Yeah, you need companies to do that, but not the state. Because the minute we have the state, we have bureaucracy, we have people who are not producing real goods, they are producing rules and regulations, and then they are wealthy class of people. That is the basic problem. But if those companies are under the control of the people, then they will have the highest quality with the lowest possible cost. And the companies will be composed of the people who are interested to do the job. not
Hmm.
a person who has a lot of finance, who hire people who has to go for this work. Remember the 6 levels I showed?
Hmm.
Who hire people who are not interested to do the job. That's why it's always sluggish.
Right.
However, if those private companies are composed of the people interested and work as partners and the thing that they love, they will produce higher quality with lower prices because there is other competitors, because any company can be established without the permission of the state.
Hmm.
We are always thinking in a situation where the company cannot be created because it's very difficult, because the state is there, because
Yeah.
knowledge is patent. The minute we remove these, and the people has also the resources, new companies will emerge that will compete with the existing companies that will are willing to work under the people's umbrella. But the people will not live in places that doesn't have the means of life to support life. They will always select places that will support their livelihood. The minute that area is saturated with people, people will move to someone else by the money of Ibn Sabil for places that is promising for livelihood. And there is very fast. There is so many places. If we put all 8 million, will fit in Algeria, in half Algeria. I didn't make this calculation, but the other day, quickly with the calculator,
Right.
if each person has 1,000 square meter, the 8 million, I think, I forgot, less than Algeria, they will fit there. Where is the rest of the earth? Where is
Right.
the minerals?
Right.
Plus, the minerals will vanish if we follow Malthusian theory of population. Why? Because we will have bureaucracy, because we have to control it, we'll have bureaucracy, then we'll have extravagant people with Sharia, because people has access to resources,
Yeah.
and uh, the market would respond with least possible uh, products of lavish things. Yani,
Mhm.
because you are not millionaire, you will not buy a big
Right.
yacht.
Right. Right. I mean, the problem of the massive inequality has created this luxury class that consumes perhaps most of the world's resources at this point in time. Someone is asking, I think, an interesting sort of question. Again, maybe a bit practical, so you can keep your response um, concise if you don't think this is particularly pertinent. But um, times have changed to a certain extent, and now he's pointing out there's a security risk now because the US has a centralized electricity grid, and now with so much warfare going to the cyber realm and the possibility of other states kind of engaging in cyber warfare against these centralized systems. Um, you know, is this a wise kind of model to try and create? Well, actually, to be honest, this doesn't address, or this isn't really something which would affect your concern because you're talking about distributed markets rather than
So if you
central.
have a network of centralized system of distributing electricity,
Yeah.
that's totally against Qas Al-Haq.
Okay. Right.
Right?
Right. Of
That makes the state even more stronger. That
yes.
even create more monopoly.
Of course. Of course. Um, Subhanallah, do you think that the Nordic model, which was quite highly spoken of about a decade, maybe 2 decades ago, is there a model that is close to what you're talking about that could give people a sense of what this looks like in practice?
Yeah,
Because
many people say that the Austrian model, Hayek school, who got the Nobel Prize lately, he died.
hmm,
Thatcher and Reagan
yeah,
followed his school. They say that's the closest to Islam. And I disagree, because the minute we take, we free people from the hand of the state, you should have an alternative of rules and regulations.
yeah,
Otherwise, it's chaotic. As that man said, people will kill each other and so on and so forth.
right,
But the Islamic hukuk fills that vacuum. So the nearest, as they say, is the Austrian school, but I disagree, because for me, Keynesian and Austrian are almost the same, because it is their source is the human brain and not it is from God. But I'm not saying it is from God to convince only religious people. With non-Muslims, I say, let's leave God said, the Prophet said. Let's discuss things with logic. With logic. I
Hmm.
have a system here, as explained last time, will remove the class of people that are unemployed. What's wrong with that? Why you want a system that creates unemployment always? Because you are controlling all the resources.
Hmm.
Why do you want that system? They don't have an answer. So for me, Keynesian and Austrian are almost the same. There's no difference because they're coming from the human rationality. Although they have their major differences,
Yeah.
Keynes asked for and promotes intervention if there's
Right.
depression, and Hayek
Right.
wants to free people from the states. His book,
Right.
The Road for Serfdom, is very
Right.
well
But
known.
I mean, I was actually talking about a slightly different model. So those obviously are very important, and Hayek is often considered a source of free market fundamentalism, as it's described, and has helped create kind of like contemporary oligarchic structures in the United States and parts of Western Europe. I was thinking specifically about the model that has been practiced in certain Scandinavian countries, to a certain extent in places like Germany as well, where it's very common for companies to have shareholders from their employers. So employees uh, are often given a share in the company, and they are given a seat at the board to a certain degree, and it creates a greater level of, I think, investment of the person in the project that they are a part of. The Nordic model has something which I don't think you encourage, which is very high taxation, but a very strong welfare state, and an emphasis on social or socioeconomic equality. So they have some of the lowest Gini coefficients globally, so to speak. And I wonder how the model that you are advocating, if there are points of comparison to be made here, maybe you think that.
Yes, there is. Yani what they're doing by bringing people, employees, to participate more in the company with more profit and so on. That's all nice for the company. Is it nice for the whole society? That's the question. They keep polluting. They keep polluting. They keep creating these classes of people. Those companies are successful because knowledge is not for everyone. It's patent because the resources are controlled by the state. So within that pocket, the company, they're doing fine. Plus, people are retired when they're 60, 65, 70. Well, Islam, there is no such thing called retirement because it is mostly your ownership. You are a partner. You will not retire.
Hmm.
Plus, something really amazing. There is nothing called uh, Saturday and Sunday as a vacation. Why?
Right.
Because
Right.
people are tired of working under the umbrella of others. They want to have a break. But look at the people who own their jobs. They own their shops. Even the first day of Eid, they go to the shop to clean their shops, to organize their things. Look at the guy who sells fruits. If he's the owner, he keep organizing the fruits. He keep cleaning everything because it's his. They enjoy working.
Hmm.
So why Quran said, إذا نودي وإذا نودي للصلاة من يوم الجمعة. That's the only time, even that time, people used to go to work because they own their things.
Right.
If we call, if the call for prayer for Friday, stop your work and go. Then فانتشروا في الأرض, then go back to your work. So people will like their work if they own it. Then they don't need vacation.
Hmm.
In fact, their vacation is their own work. They develop things, they add things, it's totally different way of thinking. We will not have these
Hmm.
new Juhur Dab or these new schools of management. That is their main purpose, is how to create incentives for people to work harder.
Right.
You won't have that. We'll have totally different schools of management where people working together will create their own management. I'm not saying we don't need management, but it should
Right.
have different style. The same goes for planning. Planners now work for the
Hmm.
government. And they
Hmm.
create whatever they want and force it on the people. There
Right.
is a researcher, Freiberg, Brent or Freiberg, something like that. He was in, I think, Norway. I think went to Harvard.
Right.
His book became famous about rationalizing the decision.
Hmm.
Usually, in these projects, in most uh, major projects, governmental decisions are not rational.
Right.
It's the outcome competing, uh, the outcome of competing interest groups. Then they will rationalize the decision.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it's not rational. So the realm of planning will change from being under the umbrella of the state to being under the umbrella of the, let's say, group of people became wealthy from extracting minerals. Now their son, for their kids, they want to make a factory for cars. They bring a planner who plan for them the factory, their streets. They can make their communities. And the people, when they revive their land, they don't revive it the way we think of it now as uh, Gijakonda or Akshak or Ashwaiyat or
Hmm.
uh, favelas. No,
Right. Right. Right.
they will create their own neighborhoods with their own wedding halls, with their own tennis courts, with their own wide streets, with parking space, with lavish sidewalks. They make it human for themselves. They will ask the architect, let's do it this way, that way. Plus, they are relying on conventions of other cities and similar situations that produced solutions that they can copy and improve upon. So the role of professionals will be totally different. I'm not saying that there will be no professionals, but their role will be totally different if it was under the umbrella of the people.
Barakallahu feekum. So, I mean, people are still kind of trying to. Analogies are very useful, right? To try and find a comparator. And so someone is still asking, if the Austrian School of Economics is not closer, a school that you have resemblance with, and I think there are too many disjunctions. Which school is actually the closest? We need to compare existing things so that people can better understand. Qas Al-Haq, according to this questioner, does have a lot of similarities with aspects of the Austrian school. So, do you have any thoughts on whether is
No,
this a madhab of its own?
I think it has to stay unique because it's from God. Qas al-Haq is not my invention. I
Right.
use the word Qas al-Haq because the verse says, إن الحكم إلا يقص الحق وهو خير الفاصلين. There is another reading, يقضي الحق, which means judging, making حق. يقضي الحق. There is 10 readings, one of them says يقضي الحق. وهو خير الفاصلين. Because God tailored حقوق for us, people will not collide, run in different tracks so they don't collide. So I did not invent this. So
Yes.
this system of حقوق, it is from God. Religiously, it will not resemble any other system made by human intellect.
Hmm.
If you're not religious, you give me a system that resembles Islam.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
I couldn't find.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it is sui generis, I would argue, and in some respects, so it should be, but there also needs to be sort of serious engagement intellectually and practically.
When I said you, I don't mean you. I mean the guy who was,
Of course, of course. No, no, absolutely, absolutely. And unfortunately, we are very short on time. I don't think we have that much time to uh, sort of perhaps indulge in that line of thinking too much at this point in time. I had a couple of other questions, and I'm just looking at the questions from the audience. I think I've asked many, if not most of them. Someone is asking an interesting question, which is historical. Could you explain how rights or hukuk creates or created belonging, as historically speaking, it was based on tribalism or nationalism from the onset? The Muhajirun caliphs versus the Ansar, Muhajirun versus the Ansar, the Qurayshis versus the other Arabs, the Prophet's descendants versus the Umayyads, the Ottomans, etc., and Ibn Khaldun theorizing kinship, ideological semblance rather than material hukuk.
Well, this is a long question. Now, Shafi'i radiallahu anhu had very interesting sentence. He says, those who claim, it's in the book, Qas Al-Haq, that that land is theirs and it is not urbanized, it's not theirs. Before Islam, the people used to say, these are our lands between those mountains. From this to that river is our, we inherited. When Islam came, said, land that doesn't have any traces of urbanization, like a building, a school, farm, it's not owned, it's dead. He who revived it will take it. He doesn't have to live in it. Maybe somebody comes and make housing project, 3 or 4 houses, then he sell them. He doesn't have to live in them. Anyhow, he make them alive, revive the land, then he owns it. The same applies for all lands, for resources. A tribe cannot say, the gold in this mountain is ours. No, it is for those who take it, possess it. Now, if one think in this manner, will come up with the conclusion that the percentage of owners will be very high in the society, and that's in the advantage for even the tribes that are claiming that that land is ours. And this is very clear in among the ulama. They make this very clear. Even some say if you revive a land and lift it and it became ruined, it goes back as dead. Some ulama said, no, it stays yours because you already made an effort on it. But if you sold it, it is yours. If you sold it, it is yours, even if it's ruined, because the guy who bought it paid you the efforts that you made. So he cannot lose his effort that he saved. So if one think in this manner, one will come up with the conclusion that there is so much areas that are not owned by anyone that will push more people to have better life by possessing those lands and those resources. Does this
Um,
answer your question?
I think it does.
Yeah,
But this person is asking something also about the idea of asabiya, like how do we overcome these kinds of different, sorry, um, how are rights or hukuk created, how did rights or hukuk create a sense of belonging?
yes, he's talking about the loyalty khittas.
Yeah,
Loyalty khittas is if a group
yeah.
in Islam, in the Battle of Hawazin, after the Battle of Hawazin,
Hmm.
uh, the booty were uh, much, and the Prophet didn't know uh, who among the people who has the right of booty gave away their booty or they want to take it and so on. So it was not clear for him. So he assigned al-a'ra,
Urafa.
al-urafa, al-urafa from each tribe to give them, to give him their opinion. Now, some said that those urafa, some scholars, those urafa, are the ones like the guys in the parliament to uh, take care of the peoples behind them who represent them. Now, what I'm saying is that those urafa, if one reads the situation very well, they are transmitting their rights to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They are not representing them in accepting or uh, getting rid of their rights. No, they are transmitting their rights. Now, a tribe could have a leader who might be elected to be one of the, if you remember the diagrams of the khitat, who could be a member of the larger khitta. From those larger khitta, one or two could go to the next level and so on.
Hmm.
So, Asabiya was used by the Prophet ﷺ in war, even the Khulafa, because when they fight together in the same place, they are they don't want to be defeated from their side because they have the center, left, right, maymana, maysara. So it was used by the Prophet to enhance competition between the tribes to fight bravely. Now, can this be used these days? It could be. Maybe this tribe can make airplanes, other tribes can finance making guns, third make all kinds of weapons يعني. That could be, because it's not under the control of the state. Maybe the tribe could be now different. It could be like Silicon Valley. It could be one tribe. People who know each other with the same interest could work together. That's why I said it is production خطة, loyal خطة, and special خطة. All are possible. So the tribe is always possible. I made simple investigation about dead-end streets, the people living around it, in the book of M.Arch.A.S. If you look at books of history, all kinds of integration are there in the dead street, and they name it. They say the street of Akrad, Kurds, the street of Turks, the street of uh, Egyptians. But at the same time, they say the street of Hanbalis, the street of Shafi'is. At the same time, they say the street of the carpenters, the street. So all possible combinations are there, not limited to what described as blood tie. So that's why I say Islam is valid to all times, all places, because with these types of khittas, different types of asabiyas or loyalties could appear.
SubhanAllah. So just in
But,
summary,
but the main thing,
yes.
role in the hands of the people. They are the ones to make the khittas, not external authority. Otherwise, we will have this all diseases that we talked about.
Jazakumullah khairan, Dr. Jamil. As always, I think your reflections and your thoughts generate a lot of thinking, and create a lot of questions in our minds. That it's actually a very healthy sort of aspect of your contribution, I think, in this particular discussion, but also in your writings, very extensive writings. I feel that we haven't really done justice to the extent of the work that you've both presented, but also, of course, written. And I hope, inshallah, at some point in the future, we'll continue these discussions. But at this point, I think it falls to me to just express my gratitude, barakallahu fikum, for your time. You've been very generous. 2 hours today, but also 2 hours a few weeks ago. Also want to encourage our audience members and myself first and foremost. Unfortunately, I haven't had the opportunity in the last few weeks because I've been moving country to spend much time in your book, Qas Al-Haq in particular, your magnum opus. But I would encourage everyone to try and get their hands on Qas Al-Haq. Dr. Jamil's very kindly also shared his email address, and when we have the video up, you can actually go back to the slides and find his email address there. If you wish to engage him in conversation and critique of the work. And of course, you have this on your website. The whole book is downloadable in Arabic. And if anyone wishes to translate sections of it, you're more than welcome to. If you wish to translate some of his discussions that are also found on his YouTube channel, which has been shared, you're welcome to do this. So it's been a great honor, Dr. Jamil. حياكم الله وبياكم. Inshallah, I look forward to staying in touch with yourself and learning from your work, and really allowing these intellectual provocations to be transformative to our own thinking, but also, inshallah, to our practice as an ummah. I think the Ummatics Colloquium and Ummatics as an institution owes you a debt of gratitude for making us think about these questions very systematically. Barakallahu fikum. If you'd like to say anything else, please feel free.
Yes, just thank you for this opportunity, and I hope that people will take it seriously, read about it, and translate anything they want, and just go ahead without telling me. Yani. After you finish it, send me an email or a note in the social media, and I will see it. I will repost it and so on. But don't be angry with me if I did not respond to your emails, because sometimes I'm bombarded yani, with 30 messages from emails, social media. It's beyond my capacity to handle. So sometimes I don't. Yani, I'm a person in his 70 and I barely have time for these things. Plus, I have to finish the remaining chapters, which will not add much to. Yani, if you read what's there, it's sufficient. The others are details to explain or nail down the ideas there. Thank you for your hospitality, and it's memorable really. First strong exposure to the Western culture.
And certainly, inshallah, not the last. Bi-idhnillahi ta'ala. Jazakumullah khairan again. And with that, we come to a conclusion. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.